5 years ago, I sat in a marble cold law office and watched my entire world burn. The lawyer's voice echoed like a verdict. $2.1 billion to Margaret Hayes, and the failing Carter dynamics to her daughter, Emily Carter. My stepmother smirked. My stepbrother laughed. They expected me to crumble under the weight of a dying company drowning in debt. They expected me to disappear. Instead, I rebuilt everything they tried to bury me with. Brick by brick, deal by deal. Now, Carter Dynamics stands taller than ever, strong, profitable, untouchable. I thought I had finally outrun the past. I thought the dead stayed dead. But last night, at 12:03 a.m., someone pounded on my penthouse door. When I opened it, rain poured in and so did a ghost, a trembling man, soaked, broken, and carrying a truth powerful enough to destroy everything I rebuilt. My father? The man I buried 5 years ago. I still remember the smell of that room, the sharp sting of leather, old paper, and something colder, metallic, like the taste of betrayal before it hits your tongue. I was 26, sitting at the far end of a long mahogany table, hands pressed together so tightly my knuckles turned white. Across from me, my stepmother, Margaret Hayes, lounged comfortably in a white blazer that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Next to her, her son, my stepbrother Dylan, scrolled through his phone, smirking like he already knew how the story would end. The lawyer, Patrick Grant, cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" Margaret didn't look at me. She didn't have to. I could feel her satisfaction radiating across the table like a spotlight. Patrick opened the folder. "This is the last will and testament of Jonathan Carter, my father." My heartbeat stuttered once. He continued reading the preamble, dates, signatures, legal jargon, but none of that mattered. What mattered was the moment the room fell silent, the moment his voice shifted. "To my wife, Margaret Hayes Carter, I leave all liquid assets, all real estate properties, all investment portfolios and trusts, for a total value of," he paused, "approximately $2.1 billion. Dylan whistled under his breath, grinning. Margaret's lips twitched upward so slightly only someone who despised her as I did would notice. Patrick cleared his throat again. "And to my daughter, Emily Carter." I lifted my chin. "Here it comes. I leave full ownership of Carter Dynamics, including all liabilities, all outstanding debts, all pending lawsuits, and all remaining operational responsibilities." Silence. Then Dylan burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Dad actually did it. He dumped the corpse on you." Margaret placed a manicured hand over his arm, but her eyes were locked on mine, cold, victorious, merciless. "You're lucky, Emily," she said softly. "You always wanted responsibility. That company is weeks away from bankruptcy," Dylan added. "Even vultures don't want it." I swallowed, my throat burning. It felt unreal. Surreal. "Like watching someone else lose their life," Patrick asked. "Do you have any questions, Miss Carter?" "Yes. Why? Why would my father do this? Why would he hand them billions and leave me with a sinking ship?" But my voice refused to come out. My father was dead. The answers died with him. So instead, I rose to my feet, pushed my chair back, and said the only thing I could force past my lips. "No, I'm done here." Behind me, I heard Margaret's whisper, soft, poisonous. "She won't last a month." Outside, the air was cold, the sky gray, rain starting to fall in thin, cold needles. I stood on the courthouse steps with my hands trembling, my entire world collapsing inward. But collapse didn't mean surrender. I wiped my face, lifted my chin, and whispered to myself, "If you want me to drown, you should have thrown me into deeper water." And I walked away alone, humiliated, furious, but with a decision burning inside me so bright it hurt. I would rebuild what they tried to bury me with. I would turn that dying company into an empire, and one day, they would regret every laugh, every sneer, every word. They thought the will destroyed me. But that was the day I began to rise. 2 days after the will reading, I stood in front of the rusted iron gates of Carter Dynamics, the inheritance they dumped on me like a joke. The wind smelled like wet metal and old smoke. The company sign, once bold and polished, now hung crooked with half the letters missing. A security guard squinted at me. "You're Miss Carter?" I nodded. He hesitated. "Ma'am, I thought, well, Margaret said you wouldn't show up." Of course she did. Inside, the building was worse than I imagined. The lights flickered. Half the production line was shut down. Papers covered the floors. Phones rang endlessly with no one answering. Two workers shouted in Spanish about missing payroll. A shattered coffee pot lay on the ground. This wasn't a company. It was a graveyard wearing a badge. A woman in her 50s, hair frizzy with stress, rushed toward me. "Miss Carter, I didn't know you were visiting. I'm Laura, the operations manager. I'm so sorry for the chaos." "It's fine," I said, though nothing was fine. She laughed bitterly. "No, it's not. 3 executives quit last week. 2 lawsuits came in yesterday, and the bank called again this morning." Perfect. Exactly what Margaret and Dylan wanted. I entered the boardroom where 5 remaining board members sat gloomy like mourners. The oldest, Mr. Rowan, sighed deeply. "Emily, I'm sorry. Your father was a great man, but this company is finished. The best thing you can do is file for controlled bankruptcy. Preserve your dignity." "My dignity?" I repeated quietly. Rowan nodded. "There's no saving this place." I took a breath. A long, sharp, painful breath. "No," I said. "We're not filing anything." Rowan looked stunned. "Emily, this company isn't dead," I said firmly. "It's drowning, yes. But drowning means it's still alive. We're going to pull it back." A younger board member scoffed. "With what money? With what staff? With what miracle?" I didn't have answers. Not yet. But I had willpower and a fury that could burn cities. "I'm staying," I said. "Resign now if you want. But I'm fighting." Laura stared at me with wide eyes. Rowan exhaled slowly. No one resigned. Not yet. By noon, I was touring the production floor. Machines covered in dust, workers leaning on walls, exhausted, unsure whether to stay. A man approached mid-30s, grease on his hands, tired but sharp-eyed. "Miss Carter? I'm Carlos Medina, senior engineer." He extended his hand. I shook it. "How bad is it, Carlos?" He didn't sugarcoat. "We're weeks from shutting down. Parts are outdated. Clients don't trust us anymore." "But..." He paused, then said something no one else dared to. "If someone actually gave a damn, this place could rise again." I stared at him. "You think so?" He shrugged. "Fire the lazy execs. Replace the rotten suppliers. Modernize the product. It'll take blood, sweat, and probably your sanity. But yes, it's salvageable." For the first time that day, hope flickered. "Carlos," I said softly, "I'm giving a damn." His lips twitched. "Then I'm staying." By sunset, I moved into the office literally. Slept on the old leather couch, ordered takeout, spread every financial sheet across the floor. And as the building emptied, as silence swallowed the halls, I whispered to myself, "They wanted me to drown? Fine, I'll learn to breathe underwater." And that night, while the world slept, I planned the resurrection of Carter Dynamics. 1 sleepless hour at a time. 3 months. That's how long it took for me to realize rebuilding a dying company wasn't just hard, it was war. War with competitors. War with the banks. War with exhaustion. War with myself. Every morning, I woke up on that office couch with my neck stiff, my eyes burning, and a stack of bills waiting to strangle me before breakfast. Carlos, bless him, was always the first to arrive. Sometimes, before the sun rose. "Morning, boss," he said one day, carrying 2 coffees. "You look like you fought a dragon." "I did," I muttered. "It's called payroll." He snorted. "Payroll is easy. Wait till you see what the suppliers sent." He dropped a box of defective parts onto my desk, cracked metal, cheap plastic, useless junk we were forced to use because it was all we could afford. I wanted to scream, but screaming doesn't rebuild companies. So I made calls. Endless calls. Days of negotiating. Nights of reading contracts. Begging banks for extensions. Convincing suppliers to delay payments. Trying to stop the company from bleeding faster than I could stitch. One afternoon, I sat in the conference room with the remaining board members. "We need funding," Rowan insisted. "Without investors, we'll be locked out of the market." "I know," I said. "But no one will invest in us," another board member snapped. "We're radioactive." Radioactive. That word stuck. Fine. If no one wanted to touch us, I'd burn bright enough to force them to look. So I flew to New York with a backpack, my laptop, and a pitch deck that looked more like a prayer than a real proposal. The investment firm's receptionist looked at me like I didn't belong. Maybe I didn't. When the meeting finally started, 7 stone-faced investors stared at me across a glass table. One of them asked, "Why should we take a chance on a sinking ship?" I inhaled sharply. Then I spoke the truth. "Because I'm not asking you to save a company. I'm asking you to invest in a resurrection." I slid photos across the table of old machinery, of struggling workers, of the very heart of Carter Dynamics. This company was my father's, and I refused to let it die just because my stepmother wanted me erased. "I'm not here for charity. I'm here to offer you the future." One investor scoffed. Another leaned back. But a third one, a woman in a navy blazer, tapped her pen thoughtfully. "Passion is great," she said. "But what makes you think you'll succeed where your father failed?" I met her eyes. "Because I don't have the luxury of failing." Silence fell. A long one. Then she said, "We'll give you a trial contract. 90 days. Impress us." I nearly sagged in relief. Back at the factory, when I told Carlos the news, he laughed out loud. "Oh, this is big, Emily. Huge." "It's a chance," I said. "Nothing more." "Sometimes," he replied, "a chance is all a dying company needs." From that day, something changed. The workers saw the spark. The board stopped fighting me. Orders trickled in small at first, then bigger. I was still tired, still scared, still carrying the weight of a company on my shoulders. But for the first time since inheriting the ruins of Carter Dynamics, I felt something warm bloom inside me. Hope. Real, solid, dangerous hope. And hope is the first step toward building an empire. By the end of the 3rd year, the factory no longer felt like a graveyard. It breathed again. Machines hummed with purpose. Workers walked with energy instead of dread. Emails from clients shifted from threats to praise, and every financial report felt like a quiet victory. Carter Dynamics wasn't just surviving. It was rising fast. But success is loud, and loud things attract attention I didn't want. One Tuesday morning, I walked into my office to find the latest Forbes issue on my desk. Carlos had circled a headline in red, "The Young Female CEO Reviving a Dying Industry." He grinned. "You made it, boss." I snorted. "I made page 26. Calm down." "It's still Forbes," he insisted. "What next? Time magazine?" I rolled my eyes, but a tiny part of me glowed. That glow didn't last, because fame is a double-edged knife, and mine sliced right back at me. 3 days later, Dylan showed up. Not a call, not a text. He just strutted into my lobby in sunglasses and a custom suit like he owned the building. My receptionist nearly choked. "Miss Carter, he says he's family?" Unfortunately, he barged into my office without knocking. Typical Dylan. Well, he said, scanning the room. "Look who learned to play CEO." I kept my voice steady. "Get out. Relax, sis. I'm here to congratulate you." He walked around, touching things like he was inspecting property he planned to steal. "Margaret and I have been watching your little comeback. Don't touch that," I snapped as he picked up a prototype part. He smirked. "The press loves you, investors love you. Even Dad would have loved seeing this if he were alive." My stomach tightened. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "But don't forget, Emily, none of this erases the truth." "What truth?" I asked quietly. "That you're still nothing without Dad's company. Without the Carter name. Without the pity inheritance he dumped on you." I stepped closer. "Dylan, the last time I checked, you and your mother took billions. I took debt, and I turned it into a legacy." He blinked, surprised by my boldness. Then his lips curled. "You think this is a legacy? Look around. These are scraps compared to what we have." I smiled thinly. "Then why are you here begging for attention in my office?" His face reddened. "I'm not begging." "Then leave." For a moment, he looked like he might explode. But instead, he placed both hands on my desk, leaned in, and whispered, "Be careful, Emily. Success makes enemies, even inside family." Then he walked out as abruptly as he came. Carlos entered seconds later. "What the hell was that tornado in a suit?" "Nothing," I said, though my chest was still tight. A ghost of the past. But inside, I felt it a shift in the air, a storm gathering at the edge of everything I had built. And I was right, because a week later, Carter Dynamics hit its biggest milestone yet, a record-breaking aerospace contract, worth more money than I could have imagined 5 years ago. Reporters swarmed my building. Headlines exploded. My inbox turned into a war zone. And while I stood on stage accepting the industry award, flashes blinding my eyes, applause filling my ears, I felt something else, a chill running down my spine, as if someone somewhere was watching, not with pride, but with hunger, with resentment, with plans. I didn't know then, but that success, that spotlight, that moment of triumph, was the beginning of the darkest night of my life. The night everything shattered didn't begin dramatically. There was no thunder, no omen, no forewarning, just silence. I had just finished reviewing the quarterly report's record-breaking numbers, the kind of results I used to dream about when I slept on that cracked leather couch during those first brutal months. It was 12:03 a.m. I was alone in my penthouse, barefoot, hair tied up, sipping cold coffee and pretending it was wine. And then, bang, bang, bang. A violent knock shook the door so hard I froze. My first thought wasn't fear, it was annoyance. Who the hell comes to a CEO's penthouse past midnight? I set the mug down, walked to the door, and peered through the peephole. At first I saw only darkness. Then a face lifted. Soaked, pale, hollowed out. A man stood there, drenched from the storm outside, gripping the doorframe as if he would collapse. I felt my lungs turn to stone. No, it couldn't be. My fingers moved on their own, unlatching every lock. When the door swung open, rain spilled in like a wave, and so did he. His lips trembled. His clothes were torn. His eyes, those familiar steel-gray eyes, stared into mine with desperate recognition. Emily, he whispered. My girl, please. I stepped back, shaking. You're dead. His knees buckled. I lunged forward, catching him before he fell on the marble floor. His body was frighteningly light, trembling from cold and hunger. Dad? The word tore out of me. Dad? He squeezed my wrist weakly. It's me. I'm here. My chest collapsed inward. It was him. Jonathan Carter, my father. The man I buried 5 years ago. The man whose name haunted every decision I made. The man I thought abandoned me in the cruelest way possible. And he was alive and broken. I pulled him into the living room, wrapped him in blankets, turned on the heater full blast. Sit here, don't move. I'll get water. And food. God, Dad, what happened to you? He shivered violently as he drank, coughing between gulps. His voice was a rasp. Emily, forgive me. I didn't leave you. My hands stilled. What are you talking about? You died in a helicopter crash. He shook his head slowly. No crash, no accident. I stared at him, heart hammering. Then what happened? He closed his eyes, as if dragging the memory from a place soaked in pain. They tried to kill me. Silence. But not empty silence. The kind that screams. Who? I whispered. He opened his eyes, sharp, terrified. Margaret. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I would vomit. Margaret? My stepmother? Dad, what are you saying? She drugged me, he choked. Said it was for stress. Strong sedatives, every day. Made me weak, confused, helpless. My breath stopped. The will, the missing clarity, the $1 billion transfer. Oh my God, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. She wanted the money, all of it. She forced me to sign things. I didn't understand what I was signing. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't fight her. He squeezed his eyes shut. The last thing I remember clearly, she said, the pilot would take care of everything. Then, darkness. And when I woke up, he swallowed hard. I was in a small cabin, hurt, disoriented. A stranger found me in the woods. He thought I was homeless, concussed. I couldn't remember anything except fragments. I covered my mouth. You were alive, I whispered. Lost, alone. And we buried an empty coffin. He nodded painfully. I tried to remember, tried to get back. But every time I pushed, my mind burned. Years passed. I wandered, worked odd jobs, living like a ghost. It is a night to heaven. Tears blurred my vision. But 3 weeks ago, I saw you. He reached out, touching my cheek with trembling fingers. I saw you on a TV in a diner. You were giving a speech, strong, confident. My daughter, the CEO. And suddenly, like lightning, everything returned. Your face brought it all back. My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. So, you came here. I walked, he whispered. Hitchhiked. slept under bridges. I had no money, no ID, just the memory that my daughter was alive somewhere, and she needed the truth. I felt myself shaking not from fear, but from rage. Rage so deep it made my skin burn. Margaret, her smile, her lies, her $2.1 billion inheritance built on poisoning my father, erasing me, destroying him. My father's grip tightened, desperate. Emily, Margaret won't stop. She thinks I'm dead. If she learns I'm alive, she'll finish what she started. I rose to my feet, fists clenched. No, I said, voice shaking with fury. She won't touch you again. He looked up at me, hopeful and terrified all at once. What are you going to do? I stared at the storm outside, lightning flashing across the windows like cracks in the sky. Dad, I rebuilt the company they tried to bury me with. I turned back to him, my voice full steel. Now I'm going to destroy the lies they built their empire on. The morning after my father collapsed into my arms, I woke up with a fire inside me. Not fear, not panic, purpose. Margaret tried to kill my father. She stole $2.1 billion. She erased me from his life, and she nearly erased him from existence. I wasn't going to the police empty-handed. I needed evidence, real evidence, strong enough to burn her entire empire to the ground. So I started with the person most likely to know something, the family doctor. I found Dr. Harrison in his private clinic in Palo Alto. His face paled the moment I stepped into his office. Miss Carter, he said, standing too quickly, knocking over a pen cup. I wasn't expecting. Good, I said, closing the door behind me. Because I'm not here for pleasantries. He swallowed. What is this about? I placed a photo on his desk, my father, the night he returned. Weak, bones visible, eyes hollow. The doctor froze. You told us he died in a helicopter crash, I said quietly. But here he is, alive. He sank into his chair, face draining of all color. I didn't know. Emily, Stop lying. My voice was ice. For 5 years, you overprescribed sedatives to a man who didn't need them. Why? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Then finally a whisper. Your stepmother, she told me to. I leaned closer. She paid you? He nodded, trembling. She said your father was overwhelmed, that he needed something stronger to sleep. When I hesitated, she threatened to ruin me. I pulled a folder from my bag and dropped it onto his lap. Then you won't mind giving me every prescription record, every dosage increase, every note she ever sent you. The doctor winced. If she finds out? She won't, I said. Because you're going to give me everything, right now. He stared at the door, then at me, then slowly nodded. 20 minutes later, I left with a full file of documents. Prescription logs. Margaret's handwritten notes. Dates lining up perfectly with the time Dad began losing clarity. It was a start, but I needed more. Next, I tracked down someone my stepmother never expected I'd find. Her ex-assistant, Olivia Brooks. Olivia answered the door of her small apartment wearing sweatpants and suspicion. Emily Carter? She asked. If you're here about Margaret, I swear I haven't worked for that woman in years. I know, I said. That's why I'm here. Her eyes softened. She stepped aside to let me in. The moment I sat down, she said the words I was hoping for. I always knew something was off, especially with your father. My heart pounded. What do you know? She hesitated, and then whispered, Margaret told me to hide medication bottles, destroy messages. She said it was just to protect Jonathan's image. But once, I saw her mix something into his tea before board meetings. What did you do with the bottles you hid? I asked. She stood, walked to her closet, pulled out a dusty shoebox and handed it to me. Inside were empty sedative bottles, half-full ones, all prescribed to my father, all beyond any legal dosage. My breath caught. This could put her in prison. Olivia nodded grimly. I kept them because I always feared she'd get away with whatever she was doing. I took her hand. You did the right thing. We agreed she would give a sworn statement. But the real breakthrough came that night. I was going through the documents again when Carlos knocked on my office door. Boss, he said, holding his phone. You need to see this. A video played. Dylan, at a private club, drunk, loud. His voice slurred but clear. Dad didn't just die. Mom made sure he'd never come back. All that money is ours. My blood went cold. Where did you get this? I whispered. Anonymous email, he said. Whoever sent it, They want your stepfamily destroyed. I played it again. 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 Proof. Real proof. Pieces of the puzzle slammed together. Dad's sedation. The staged crash. The forged will. The stolen billions. Margaret and Dylan had built their empire on murder attempts and manipulation. And now? I had everything I needed to take them down. I closed my laptop, exhaled slowly, and said, "Carlos? Yeah? Prepare yourself. For what?" I looked up, eyes burning. For war. The day of the shareholders' meeting felt like the calm before an execution. The Fairmont Hotel ballroom glowed with chandeliers, expensive suits, and the electric buzz of reporters waiting for blood. They weren't here for business. They were here for a spectacle. And Margaret planned to give them one. I entered through the side corridor with Carlos at my shoulder, and my father hidden in a private waiting room, guarded by 2 ex-military security men. My hands shook despite everything, not from fear. From anticipation. Today, the truth would finally rise from the dead. When I stepped onto the stage, hundreds of eyes locked on me, flashes, whispers. "Is that Emily Carter? She looks nervous. She's going to lose the company today." Margaret stood across from me, draped in a navy designer suit, hair flawless, smile venomous. Dylan lounged beside her, acting bored, but I could see the tension in his jaw. The interim chair tapped the mic. "We're here to address the legitimacy of leadership at Carter Dynamics." Margaret cut him off. "Actually," she said sweetly, stepping forward, "I'd like to begin." Of course she would. She took the center stage, holding the mic like a queen about to condemn someone to death. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I come to you not only as a major shareholder but as the widow of Jonathan Carter." Murmurs. "As many of you have seen, my stepdaughter Emily has been spreading outrageous lies about me. Claims of manipulation, fraud, and even attempted murder." She pressed a hand dramatically to her chest. "It's absurd. She is grasping at straws because she knows she is not the rightful heir to Carter Dynamics." My fingers curled into fists. "She has fabricated evidence," Margaret continued, "including forged medical records and doctored videos." A reporter raised a hand. "Mrs. Hayes, what about the allegations of overprescribed sedatives?" Margaret smiled politely. "Jonathan Carter was under the care of licensed medical professionals. Anything else is a desperate act by a young woman terrified of losing power." Dylan leaned into the mic. "Emily's just angry dad didn't trust her. And now she's trying to rewrite his death for sympathy. It's pathetic." The room buzzed with gasps. Reporters scribbled. Shareholders whispered. My pulse roared in my ears. I stepped forward. "That's enough." Margaret turned, smiling like a wolf. "Oh? You finally want to speak, dear?" I held her gaze. "Yes. But first, let's clear one thing up." I nodded subtly to the back of the room. The ballroom doors slammed open. Gasps erupted immediately, one wave of shock sweeping the room. My father stepped inside, alive, walking slowly, supported by a cane, thinner, older, haunted, but undeniably alive. The room exploded. "Is that Jonathan Carter? He's alive? Call security, what is happening?" Margaret went white. Not pale, dead white. Her eyes bulged like she'd seen a ghost crawl straight out of the underworld. Dylan stumbled back, knocking into a chair. No, this isn't real. You died." My father approached the stage, breath trembling but voice steady. "I'm alive," he said into the mic, "and I'm here to tell the truth." The room fell into a perfect, terrified silence. He looked at Margaret not with anger, but with the grief of a man betrayed by the person he trusted most. "You drugged me," he said quietly. "You manipulated me into signing documents I could barely read. You isolated me, weakened me, and planned my death." Margaret's breath hitched. "Jonathan, please, don't," he snapped, and the sharpness of it sliced the air. Then I stepped in. I opened my laptop and hit play. Screens lit up around the ballroom, every monitor, every projector showing. The prescription logs. Margaret's handwriting. Dr. Harrison's confession. Olivia's statement. And then the final blow. Dylan's drunken admission. Mom made sure Dad would never come back. The room turned violent with outrage. "You monster!" someone shouted at Margaret. "Arrest them. They tried to kill Carter. This is criminal." Margaret's mask shattered. She grabbed Dylan's arm, trembling violently. "Dylan, say something. Do something." But Dylan was collapsing inward, panic all over his face. We're being set up, he shouted. Emily's framing us. This is fake. It's all fake. My father stepped closer. No, he said softly. The only fake thing here was the life you two tried to build on my grave. The room detonated with applause. Fierce, furious, vindicated applause. Margaret dropped to her knees, sobbing. Dylan backed away in horror as shareholders surged forward, demanding they be removed. Security took them by the arms. As they were dragged past me, Margaret hissed, "This isn't over." I met her eyes. "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." And for the first time in 5 years, I felt the weight of my father's absence finally begin to lift. 3 weeks after the shareholders' meeting, the world felt strangely quiet. Too quiet, like the air right after a storm that nearly tore everything apart. But the storm was over. The courts ruled swiftly. My father's death certificate was nullified. The will was invalidated. Every asset Margaret and Dylan had stolen was frozen, then reclaimed. The last time I saw them was outside the courthouse. Margaret in a wrinkled coat, makeup smudged from crying, begging her lawyer for a miracle. Dylan pacing like a trapped animal, muttering to himself. They didn't look rich, or powerful, or invincible. They looked small. The collapse of their empire was immediate. Partners cut ties. Banks demanded repayment. Reporters followed them like vultures. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel hatred toward them, just emptiness. My father spent the next few weeks adjusting to life again, a real life, not the ghost state he had survived in for years. He stayed with me in the penthouse. The first morning, he made tea and burned it so badly the smoke alarm went off. I laughed harder than I had in years. He smiled sheepishly. "It'll take time to remember how to be normal," he said. I touched his arm. "We'll take that time together." Sometimes I found him staring out the window at the city lights, eyes heavy with guilt. "I should have protected you, Emily," he whispered once. "I failed." I shook my head. "You didn't fail. You survived. And you came back." He swallowed hard. "You deserved better." Maybe I did. But I wasn't that girl anymore, the one crying on courthouse steps while Margaret and Dylan laughed. I had built something stronger than money or revenge. I had built myself. Work at Carter Dynamics changed after that. The board no longer treated me like a young executive trying her luck. They treated me like what I had become, a leader. My name wasn't an afterthought anymore. It was a headline, a force. But late at night, when the city quieted and the adrenaline faded, I realized something. My victory wasn't destroying Margaret. It wasn't reclaiming billions. It wasn't even saving the company. My victory was choosing peace over hatred, rebuilding not just an empire but a life. A family of 2 people who had been broken and found their way back to each other. One evening, as I wheeled my father onto the balcony to watch the sunset over the bay, he squeezed my hand gently. "Emily," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You saved me." I smiled softly. "No," I whispered. "We saved each other." The sun dipped behind the skyline, painting gold over the city I had fought to rise in. A city that once swallowed me now bowed quietly at my feet. And as my father leaned his head on my shoulder, I realized they tried to bury me with a dying company, but all they did was plant a woman who refused to stay underground.